you just wait 2 years, more young people will be on the electorate, and quite a few of the oldies will have died off. While there is death, there is hope. Now, I wouldn't want to say that myself, but that fact of the younger people brings me neatly on to your question, because the strength of support for remaining in Europe among young people was not, in my view, primarily economic or fear of the economics of leaving. It was cultural. It was, yes, we feel European. It's the Erasmus generation. It's those who travel on Interrail. It's those who have fellow students from all over Europe at their universities. It's that generation that we can use that argument even more strongly with. So I agree with you on that, and I agree that it was a big mistake of the Remain campaign to have just focused only on the negative economic consequences and hardly addressed any other aspect of Europe. And there are plenty of other aspects of why we want to be in Europe. And yeah, I think that's...
There are plenty more over these.
Mine's a simple question really about moves in Strasbourg, actually. I can't help but feel that it's not going to make the government's task of taking us out of the European Union any easier to feel it might have a fifth column here. I'm interested to know how far this project to develop a European passport, which would also be applicable to citizens of Norway, I believe, as this country, if it leaves, how far it's actually got. I know it's under consideration in Strasbourg.
Yes, and what over there? Yes.
Passport or citizenship?
Yeah,
Associate citizenship.
Associate, yes. Okay.
A couple of questions, but both cover
Just one.
About messaging. I think for the Labour Party, I think surely the message should be that really you have a choice now between either ending austerity and doing Brexit, because frankly there isn't the money or time or political energy to do both. The other one is just basically on the sovereignty issue. This is a big issue. Take back control is not just about immigration, it's also about sovereignty, and the argument made that by leaving if you stay in the single market, we'd be bound by rules of Brussels without having influence on it. I think the case needs to be made more often that actually, even if we leave the single market, in order to trade with the single market, we'll have to take Brussels rules. And in order to trade with most of the rest of the world, we'll have to take rules agreed by the USA, the EU, and China, for now, possibly India in the near future. I think there's a real argument there that actually by leaving, you're losing effective real sovereignty, not actually getting it back.
Yeah, just briefly, my name is Kevin. I'm on the committee for Manchester for Europe. And just quickly, it's great we've got so many people here today, so thanks for coming out. And to thank members of the Manchester for Europe committee that I believe contacted you directly and worked to get you over here, so thanks for that, guys. My point's on our group really, and obviously we've got 50 people in the room today who obviously care passionately from whatever angle that they're coming at the Brexit issue from. How do we resonate our message the most to the people in the European Parliament and to the House of Commons? Because after the vote the other day, it felt like another kick in again for me personally, but in a few days later it's kind of a bit more like, well, maybe it doesn't mean that much, the votes on the amendment, because it's not going to change the next 2 years. But what works? Is it petitioning? Is it us being on the streets campaigning? Is it letter writing? How do you hear about us, and what can we do more of?
Just carrying on from this kind of issue of people struggling to understand exactly what Europe means, and the British particularly plan on this, the degree to which Europe enters our lives. I'm curious, given the limited change post-referendum in support/opposition for the EU, do you think there would be any benefit, as Europe has often grown out of times of hardship, to a major economic shock in the UK and a massive recession to teach people, in essence, a public learning exercise on the value of Europe? Obviously it's in hindsight, and then we could then look to change our position vis-à-vis Europe. But maybe that's the only way to force an adjustment in appreciation of the EU in the UK?
Okay, let's take these 4 questions, and then there will be another round.
Okay. The associate citizenship idea is the idea that we're all European citizens at the moment. Can our citizenship be removed against our will? If British citizens want to remain citizens in the European Union, they should be able to, even if we leave. The snag is that the definition of European citizenship in the treaty is that you are a European citizen if you are a national of a member state. So if the UK ceases to be a member state, unless you have dual nationality, like most people in Northern Ireland do, for instance, most of Northern Ireland will still be European citizens after we leave, if we leave, then you lose your citizenship. So can something be done about that? Technically it would need a treaty change, agreed by everybody, so that's quite problematic. There are some clever lawyers looking at whether there may be other ways of finessing this and still keeping something, but it's a good debating point. You're going to lose your citizenship and the rights that go with it, but it's not certain that something can easily be done about it. On your point, you can either end austerity or you can have Brexit. You can't do both. I agree. I tweeted something the other day. If you want to stop austerity, you have to stop Brexit. That's certainly a point worth making vis-à-vis Labour Party members, and I dare say others as well. The sovereignty point, yes, it's true. We will still, even if we leave the single market, there will still be a lot of EU rules that we will end up following one way or another. Partly for trading reasons, partly because sometimes world-level rules that are negotiated at world level by different bodies are incorporated into law in Europe by one act of the European Union for the whole single market. And if we have to do that separately, we'll still be putting the same rule into our national law at the end of the day. So quite a lot of those rules will stay in place, it's just we won't have a say on them. Even if we leave the single market, that remains true to a significant degree. On how to get the message across to parliamentarians, write to them, ring them, go to see them in their surgeries, and do things that they will spot elsewhere. Letters to editors of newspapers, use the social media, amplify your voices wherever you can. Vis-à-vis parties as well, but also towards industry and trade unions. A lot of them are busy puzzling out now what the consequences of Brexit are for them and realising for our industry, for our firm, for our company, this is going to be a problem. And they're looking only at the assumption that we are going to leave and how can they adapt to it. Remind them that until we leave, we can change our mind. And they should say that in everything they say and do in public and vis-à-vis politicians. Don't just say, there's a problem here that needs solving, could we perhaps do this, could we perhaps do that. Also say, by the way, it would be far better if we changed our mind and stayed. Keep that debate alive. Never say when we leave, always say if we leave. Keep on keeping that idea alive. There was a reference to whether, well, first the last question about would a really awful recession help persuade people? Well, you're not going to get a politician saying, I want a recession. But the fact is that there will be economic damage. There already has been. The fall of the value of the pound after the referendum was initially about 20%, it's clawed its way back a little bit vis-à-vis the euro. That is having consequences. The food price inflation, the fuel inflation that is beginning to hit people now, that's now causing a loss in real wages adjusted for inflation, that is directly attributable to Brexit. Most people don't know that. So we must always say the Brexit induced fall in the value of the pound. The Brexit triggered inflation. Because of Brexit, your summer holiday this year, if you're going abroad, is going to be 15 to 20% more expensive than last year. And always link it in people's minds. What has triggered this?
There has indeed been no evidence of the balance of the trade balance improving either because of the fall of the pound.
No,
exports are not going up.
No. And this is before we've left. Remember, the biggest economic consequences are if we actually leave. But this one is already upstream. And then finally, there was a mention of the European Parliament. And one thing I perhaps should have said earlier. The European Parliament will also vote on the divorce deal, with the British members still there and voting on it. And Parliament, apart from voting yes or no, can also do one other thing. It can refer the deal to the European Court of Justice to ask the court, before voting, is this agreement compatible with the treaties, including the Charter of Rights? Any national government as well, from any of the 27, can do that too. Now, the Parliament, it's elected by citizens, it sees itself as defending citizens' rights. And if the deal on citizens' rights is less than satisfactory, which is quite possible, and remember it's both ways around, it's Brits living in other EU countries, not just the rights of Brits who are already living here to continue to have not just the right of residence, but all the rights that go with it, right of non-discrimination on the ground of nationality, right to take your pension with you if you move back home otherwise, right to healthcare, right to be joined by a family member. All those rights, both ways around, Brits there and others here. If the deal doesn't guarantee the same rights as they have now, which is quite likely, I think the European Parliament will be very tempted to refer it to the Court of Justice to say, is this compatible with the treaty and the Charter of Rights? Such a case, by the way, neatly holds things up for a year or two. The court would have to say the clock stops on the 2-year deadline pending our consideration of the case. So that's another little way in which we can keep the battle going afterwards.
Sorry, you've asked already. Yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask, I guess it goes back to the point that was made about cultural, feeling culturally part of Europe. I'm interested in those positive arguments for being close to Europe, indeed being part of Europe. I just wonder how you think that might come through, because it seems that in the UK, certainly in some communities, there isn't a real feeling of ownership of Europe or being part of that European project. And I think those arguments really need to be made. And these are areas which, for example, have received funding from the EU, but then voted to leave. So how do we make the arguments and make people feel that they've got a stake in Europe for the future?
Yes, in the back.
Two possible scenarios about to you. Firstly, in 18 months' time, whatever, a deal is negotiated and it's rejected either by Parliament here or by the second referendum. Two others, they look at all the precipice and decide to step too far. And we say, we've changed our mind. Would our membership be exactly the same as it is now? I think in terms of opt-outs, in terms of the rebate was negotiated and things like that, or would they sort of say, well, if you change your mind, you're going to lose things? Second scenario is we do leave, and in the 2020s, parties that elect into government on a pro-EU policy and decides to try and reapply for membership. What sort of membership would we get then?
Big questions. Can we perhaps come in here and run a scenario to you? Tell me if that makes sense. I've heard it in a conference, and it might be worth sharing it here, that a way of revoking or stopping Brexit would be, as already mentioned in Article 50, unanimously the European Council to extend the negotiating period. Currently it's 2 years, but there is a provision that it can be extended unanimously. And that unanimous decision then specifies that the negotiating period is 30 years, or 50 years, or 100 years, during which time, it gets even more interesting, during which time the European Union can indeed change the treaties without having an intergovernmental conference by simply scrapping Article 50. Because that can be done, because it doesn't generate new rules for European citizens. It can be done easily. It doesn't need to be a fulsome change of treaties. So is that a scenario? I mean, that is of course assuming that either the British government or the British Parliament chooses not to go ahead with it. But in terms of how we can see it happen, is that something that makes sense to you?
Well, one of the beauties of this whole situation is that it's given lots of opportunities for creative lawyers to think up scenarios. But the bottom line there is, as you've said, it needs unanimity. So it would need Britain agreeing. Now, if the British government is acquiescing in an astuce like that to stay in, well, it's far simpler to simply withdraw your Article 50 notification, and then you so that would be much more likely. And since it couldn't be done without Britain anyway, if Britain wants to stop Brexit, there are easier ways of doing it. On the question on culture, essentially I agree. Now, what really gets me going is when people say to me, I'm British, I'm not European. And we do need to get across to many people that it's not contradictory. Just as you can be English and British. I support England in football, Britain in the Olympic Games, and Europe in the Ryder Cup when we beat the Americans every 2 years. It's not contradictory, it's different dimensions. And you can support Lancashire in cricket and Liverpool in football, should I say in Manchester? These are just different dimensions. We've got to foster that idea that it's something extra you get. It's not taking anything away from you, it's an extra dimension that you gain from also being European in your identity, perhaps. Some people may feel it more strongly than others. Certainly in your culture, in your history, you know, Britain was settled over the centuries by successive waves of people coming from the continent. And then back to the scenarios. The scenario that we change our minds, can we stay in on the same basis? Yes, if Britain revokes its notification under Article 50, remember Article 50, the notification is of our intention to leave. Intentions can change. Until the deed is done, you can change your intention. And if we changed our intention, we'd be in exactly on the same basis. You do hear voices from other member states saying, well, in that case we should insist that Britain doesn't have its rebate, joins the euro, joins Schengen. But no, they wouldn't be able to insist on that. However, if we left and then applied to rejoin in a few years' time, then, as an applicant state, and every single one of the others having to agree the accession treaty and ratify it, there would be a lot of pressure in several of those countries to say, but if we're letting these buggers back in, they better play by the same rules as the rest of us on everything. And so it would be much more difficult for Britain then, if it wanted to rejoin, to avoid fully signing up. Now, some of us would be very happy if Britain did, but that's another debate and probably less likely to get acquiescence in Britain for going through that process.
We have time for 4 short questions. So, if there are any more, yes?
One quick observation on the point you've just made now. We might be in a situation that if we change our minds, we will not necessarily get exactly the same deal. Because if in November the European Medicines Agency or the European Banking Authority signed and sealed and delivered to some other European city, then of course it would be Britain's fault and we might have lost those things irretrievably, sadly.
Yeah. Yes.
On the 29th of March 2019, if we don't have a deal, we will have to agree a transitional deal. Is it possible that transitional deal will mean stay in the EU? And then if this is the case, transitionally, could it be like Norway that had a transitional deal that lasted 5 years, and we take as example the Norwegian deal? Could it be?
Regarding unanimity, if the MPs are saying it's the will of the people, so we have to be a nation of lemmings, etc., do MEPs have to play by those same rules? I mean, What if the MEPs said, well, actually, we're not going to agree with the British government's whole strategy on Brexit?
Can I perhaps throw in one final question, which has to do with the House of Commons, because a lot of what we have discussed here rests on the assumption that for Brexit to be stopped, there needs to be a House of Commons vote that goes against Brexit. Do you think that currently there is the potential for a majority on that position? And we know by looking at the numbers there that somebody will need to put together a cross-party coalition that could defeat a pro-Brexit position. Is Jeremy Corbett the right person to do it?
Okay, I'll get to that. Verse 29th of March 2019, that's the end of the 2-year period, and the treaty says if there is no agreement by then the treaty ceases to apply to the UK. It's no longer a member without an agreement. Now that's the scenario of leaving without a deal, and that really is the worst of all possible scenarios. It leaves everything in legal limbo, including the rights of citizens on both sides. It means we're out of agencies, customs union, everything. We have to apply quite high WTO tariffs on significant products. Nothing is settled. So there'll be a lot of pressure to have a deal of some sort by then. As you mentioned earlier, you can extend that deadline by unanimity. There'd be quite a lot of pressure to do it if it looks as though we were close to a deal, but there wasn't one. But there's a reluctance to go beyond May of that year because there are European Parliament elections then. And the rest of Europe doesn't really want Brexit to be not solved, as it were, by then. And the British government doesn't want to have European Parliament elections in May 2019 because they would be a surrogate referendum in practice. So they'll be desperate to avoid that. By the way, if there is a deal, the deal sets the date of departure. It could be 2 years, 5 years, 10 years later. It could be earlier, theoretically.
So there is no need for a transitional deal?
Now, I'll come on to the next point, transition. It's unlikely that everything will be settled. In fact, everything cannot be settled in the actual divorce case, the separation agreement. So that will, in all likelihood, provide that other things stay as they are until the future framework agreement is settled. Now, I actually think there's quite a big risk at the moment, given the number of subjects that have to be dealt with, the fact that we've lost a lot of time already because of the general election, and because of the divisions in the governing party, between them and the DUP as well, perhaps. The government may well go for a minimal divorce deal that settles only the issues of citizens' rights, existing budgetary liabilities of the UK, the date of departure, and one or two other things, and says everything else will be left for a future framework agreement to be negotiated over the next 3, 4 or 5 years, including in that period of time, as a transitional period, remaining in the single market and the customs union and the various agencies. It'll be difficult for the right wing of the Tory party to swallow that, but they might not have much choice, they might go along with it. But I think that poses a huge democratic problem, because the British Parliament will be invited, essentially, to buy a pig in a poke. You vote for a Brexit divorce deal that has settled none of the key issues. They all remain unknown to be solved later. And I think we need to be very aware of that danger and agitate against that happening. But I think it's not by no means impossible. Question about MEPs. No, well, we don't represent the British government in the European Union. The ministers from the government represent the UK in the Council of Ministers. MEPs are elected by citizens. Most of us are not Conservatives. Even among the Conservatives, to be fair, 2/3 of Conservative MEPs campaigned to remain. Probably now 2/3 accept that we're leaving, or want to leave, and 1/3 are still very upset about it. I know Charles Tannock, for instance, Conservative MEP from London, strongly campaigning against Brexit still. Certainly the Labour MEPs, the Lib Dem, the Green, the Plaid Cymru, the SNP MEPs are all against Brexit, or are at least reluctant Brexiteers. And when it comes to the vote on the deal, I don't see why I, or somebody, all my life I've believed in Britain being part of Europe, and I'm damned if I'm going to vote for a Brexit deal. Usually when I say that, I expect a lynch mob, so it's nice, it's nice to have some applause. Thank you very much. And then the final question, the House of Commons, would there be a majority in the House of Commons? Now, it's interesting. Before the general election, Labour had finally got its way to a position of saying, unless the divorce deal, the exit agreement, gives us exactly the same benefits as now in terms of the single market and the customs union, we will vote against it. And those words, by the way, were chosen because David Davis uttered them at some point in the past, said, don't worry, we'll get exactly the same benefits. So we said, okay, fine. Now, the fact then that it was quite clear that Labour would vote, this was ahead of the general election, would vote against the deal. So would the Lib Dems, so would the SNP, so would Plaid Cymru. It would then have needed only a very small number of pro-European Conservatives to cross the floor, and Theresa May would not have got it through. That's one reason, one major reason why she called the general election earlier, to get an increased majority. Well, she failed. She's lost the majority she had. So at the moment, if Labour holds firm at least to that position that we will vote against a deal that doesn't give us the same benefits, and it won't need many Conservatives to rebel. Now, when you think back how 10, 20 years ago, a very small number of anti-European Conservatives made life a misery for John Major, the coalition government initially. If the pro-European Conservatives were willing to be as bloody-minded, they could make a huge difference. And there are still some pro-European Conservatives. They're lying low at the moment. I think they should be listed under the CITES Convention, you know, on protecting endangered species. They need special protection because there's some nasty predators after them in their country. But we should help pro-European Conservatives. You know, I mean, those of us who are not Conservatives should reach out to them and encourage them and help them. Because they'll need courage, they will need support. Because they could make the difference, and without them it will be very difficult to do anything.
Just before
and on that point, you mentioned the European movement earlier. The new chairman of the European movement is Stephen Dorrell. And that's not a coincidence. I briefly took over as chair when the previous chair stood down. But I thought, no, I'm the wrong profile for this. I'm not going to do it until except as a stopgap. One, because I'm an MEP and it's probably the wrong profile, so everyone says, oh, you would say that anyway. Two, I'm never in London, or not often. But three, I thought tactically it's much more important to have a Stop Brexit campaign led by a pro-European Conservative. Now, Stephen Dorrell, former Cabinet Minister, Secretary of State for Health, I think he was, he's very clear. He's out to stop Brexit. Now, he knows the Conservative Party much better than I do, and he assures me that there are still Conservative backbenchers who, when the time comes, will be willing to raise their head above the parapet. I hope so, but in the meantime, he is at least living proof that some Conservatives are willing to do something.
I was about to say, before I think, Richard, let me just first thank the Britain for Europe for holding the national meeting here, particularly Manchester for Europe, who has done a terrific job campaigning in this city and has helped our centre a great deal, and those, it is to them that we owe the great speaker we got today. Let me all encourage you all to, in case you haven't done it, to participate in these kind of groups that they are coming up, because they do an important job. Follow also the German Center of Excellence here on Twitter and on Facebook and so on. We have a lot of events of this type, not only campaigning events, but also more academic and more policy-driven events as well. It is important that we debate Europe, not always from a sort of unconditionally pro-European position, but nevertheless we talk about Europe, and I think that's a really important thing for all of us to continue to do. Not least because we don't want Britain to be seen as a Singapore in the shores of Europe. We want it to still be treated as a European country, whatever happens to Brexit, right? And of course, let me thank Richard for what I thought was a terrifically informative talk today, even for anoraks like me that spend all of our life talking about the EU. I still felt that I learned a great deal, so thanks for coming. And thank you all very much for being such a terrific audience.
Really enjoyed that. Thanks. There's quite a few pictures on there.
Would you mind taking a photo for us?
Oh, yes, I've been in there. No, we haven't. This is as they were just after. No, it isn't.
Yeah, I need to stop recording actually.